reframe the American story.
The point of climbing is to try something hard. You keep growing and adapting and changing.
There's no hiding that this world we live in is a very strange one. From unexplainable happenings happening within your home, to strange encounters out in the great outdoors, this series truly covers everything that can't be explained. Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. It's good to see you made it back here for another video. Today, these viewers sent in their allegedly true and creepy encounters with things they can't explain. Most of these stories will fall within the realm of the paranormal and the supernatural. If you have a story that you would like to share in a video, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that truly help this show keep growing. Joining me today is my good friend Jensen. He read story number 2 and helped me out a ton. If you enjoy his voice, please check out his channel. He makes creepy videos and does pretty funny parodies of all your favorite narrators, including myself. So check out his link in the description down below after you're done with this video for even more scares and laughs. Now, let's get into these creepy stories that'll keep you up tonight. Hey Swamp, I hope you and your friends and loved ones are doing okay during this quarantine. I hope everyone in the swamp is doing well too. I have had this story written down for a while, and I've just now finally gotten around to sharing it. I hope you folks all enjoy it. I was staying at the Marriott Hotel in Houston back in the summer of 2019. My mom and I were staying there to visit some old friends for a little mini vacation of sorts. The day went with nothing much to report. Clarification, the following timestamps are approximate, and are to the best of my memory, since it was a few months ago at the time of this writing. I have to say that of all
Hey
the
Siri,
things I've...
text Kian.
Which one? Kion Bob. What do you want to say?
Could you bring me a charger?
Here's your message. Okay, it's sent.
Witnessed in my life. This by far takes the cake of sinister. So, without further ado, here's the story. It was around 11 p.m., and my mom and I were about to head off to sleep. My bed was closest to the door. Right as I am listening to music, I hear what sounded like a man scream. Not in a fearful or angry type way. Almost like a taunting yell, like a "Hoorah!" battle cry. Only a little different. It sounded more frantic. I don't know. Well, because I was listening to music, I thought it was part of a song, or maybe I was just hearing things. Anyway, I continued to listen to my music for a few more minutes, and then take my earbuds off and get ready to go to sleep. I actually thought for a minute that maybe I just was hearing things, and brushed it off as me being tired after a nice long day of activity. But, as I was lying there, that thought of me hearing things was shattered when I clearly heard the scream again. I then asked my mom if she heard it, and she shook her head and said no. Do keep in mind that she is hard of hearing, so I did not think too much of it. The time is now 11:06, and I'm laying back down, thinking how strange this all was. I
Oh,
thought they'd be
yes.
yelling downstairs anyway. It is true that the hotel does host some events, but surely someone would not be yelling even in celebration this late at night in a hotel, right? It was then I realized, wait a minute, surely the sound would not carry up that high. I'm on the 24th floor, and the highest open center is on the 4th floor. Just to clarify to those who have not been to the Houston Marriott, the way the hotel is set up, the center of the hotel is hollow, going up to the 30th floor. The hotel rooms are on the interior, and when you step out of your room, you have a small hallway with a 5-foot tall solid guardrail. So, if you are tall enough to peek over, you have a full top-down view of the hotel from floor to ceiling, which is really cool. Anyway, I try to go back to sleep and forget all about it. A few moments later, I heard it for a third time. Now, it was 11:09. This time, I thought, okay, this just got real. Someone could be injured or in danger. I immediately grabbed the hotel phone to call the front desk. I ended up getting customer service. Great, I thought. I accidentally dialed the wrong extension. They then asked, "Hello, sir. How's your stay with us? Do you have any questions or would you like to request room service?" I asked them if I can contact the front desk. They then reply, "May I ask if there is anything wrong?" I tell them that I am hearing this strange sound coming from the 24th floor, the floor I am staying on, and that it sounds like a man is screaming or yelling. They try to confirm that I'm just hearing another guest TV or even if it's something mechanical. I insist that it sounded like a man screaming and described it. It did not sound like someone screaming in fear or anger, but it sounded very strange and even sinister. They then tell me, "Okay, sir, stay calm, lock your door, and don't leave your room. We are sending security officers to investigate. We will call you when we hear back from them." I thank them, hang up, and wait. It was then I started to wonder why. They thought it might have been someone's TV screen or maybe some sort of mechanical issue. Would a leaking pipe or something like that sound like a man screaming? And if it was someone's TV, surely I would hear other background sounds like dialogue, music, or whatever. I am at least grateful that they agreed to send security to investigate. I waited it out, and what happened next was truly strange. After about 8 minutes go by, I then hear the scream for a fourth and final time. It was around 11:17. 2 minutes later at 11:19, I got a call back from the front desk. They tell me that apparently I was not the only one to report the scream. At least 3 other hotel guests reported the screaming shortly after I did. They then said that the security team went to check the floor in question. They reported hearing the scream but could not figure out where it was coming from. My guess is when they heard it for the fourth and final time, hotel security was already up there and heard it too. They then said they did all they could for the night and thanked me for reporting the incident and assured me that if I heard the scream again or needed anything else from them to not hesitate to call. They were very nice and I thanked them for their assistance. Eventually I went to sleep and never heard the screams again. To this day, I have no idea where exactly the scream came from, who was screaming, or why they were screaming. It could have been nothing, but I just can't help but wonder. If you have any idea what might have happened, do let me know in the comments. I'm willing to hear or rather read what your theories are. I'm especially interested considering I was not the only one to hear it. At least 3 other guests heard it, and the security officers also heard it. I do apologize if this story was too long and not very scary, but thank you for sharing if you do.
This is probably something that I'll forever remember, and it will be burned in the back of my mind. It has scared me well enough. Spiritual warfare is something that I grew up learning about in church. There are both angels and demons around us. We just can't see them. We have to learn how to decipher these things. I never thought that I'd be someone that deals with it, but here I am. I am a saved Christian woman. I got saved as a young girl, and even later, when I was older, I had understood more about what's at hand. We as Christians do still face trials, and it is easy to backslide. We're not perfect people by no means. Around the time, that's when my papa/dad was passing away. I noticed something was off, and something evil started happening in my mind. I did not know where the thoughts were coming from, and it was scaring me half to death. My dad was a Christian man. He had been saved. I knew he was being called by God or angels/loved ones who have passed on when he told me that there was a light at the door in the corner of the room away from him and where he was laying in bed. There was a black looking
sorry. I was AFK.
Anxiety slash depression and PTSD. They see and still have some of my friends. I won't lie.
That's
When
my bad.
I felt like he was safe. Like a little reminder that he's always with us. It freaks some people out though. Seeing his silhouette. He did pass away in this house though. I do recall seeing his soul embark. I don't remember him saying I'm sorry. And I do believe that was because he knew that I wasn't ready for him to leave. It sounds crazy, I know. I'm not schizophrenic though.
What?
I'd gotten
Oh.
tested because even though I thought that I had lost my own marbles at this point, I checked out fine and not schizophrenic. Okay, so I have had these thoughts for a few years since then. I do remember the Bible stating that, and I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons. Neither our fears for today nor the worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. Romans 8:38. I do remember that. Once you get saved, nothing can take you from God.
Alright.
Absolutely nothing. I would start to see things over the years in the clouds. Spooky, scary things, but also good things. Like an hourglass, skeleton, a boy, numbers, angels, eyes staring at me,
Okay.
creepy faces, etc. My bad thoughts got worse, and I started seeing creepier things a year ago. When I got involved with one of my exes and their best friend. They're both known drunks. They both have played with an Ouija board. My ex-best friend used to pray to demons. I had no idea about it until he decided to tell me. I also recall his best friend taking me to the house where everyone would go. And I remember seeing the stove on, when no one cut it on. It was
I
a
have
burning
an
smell.
iron for it.
It happened when my ex and he started fighting, and I felt super uncomfortable. His best friend at the time lived with his friend before he got kicked out, and I remember his friend, my ex, taking me to that house another time, and there were people he invited over. They were about to shoot up in front of me, and the one on paraphernalia was talking about there was a demon in the house, which made me go into panic attack. As well as the fact he almost shot up in front of me. Fast forward from this. My ex-best friend ended up coming to live with me. He had nowhere to go. He and my ex-friend had lost the house. And my mom had felt really bad for him. Bad idea. I started hearing creepy voices telling me that I can't run away forever. Saw 3 6s in the clouds when my mom, him, and I took a trip to the mountains. I recall trying to pray one time and getting up feeling dizzy, and seeing a black mass / ghost-like figure going across the computer room. I recall a time when I went to go talk to my mom, and I felt like time had stopped and like I was stuck in a place. I heard a voice talking to me. I remember smelling fire, like something burning, in random places in my home where there should be. Seeing like a random little flame come out of nowhere in front of me, and it spooked me really bad. I remember hearing like evil voices and being scared out of my wits. I remember having these bad thoughts and feeling a brush of cold air come from me, like the Holy Spirit was shielding me or protecting me. But the truth be told, you need to be super careful with your spiritual energy and who you are around. Bad spirits can linger on people and things. I had asked my pastor, former pastor, about
No,
these
that's just my
thoughts.
face cam.
They were the ones who had baptized me and witnessed me getting saved and given my life to God. They had told me that they do believe that I have been truly saved. I have
That's
felt
my
the Holy
face cam,
Spirit
so
within me. It's like a
yes.
safe feeling, like everything that has weighed you down has been released or taken from you. That's just a really good feeling. That's the only way I know how to explain it. Last night I had asked someone who also knows their Bible very well. They had told me that those thoughts are not my own. I need to be careful about who I'm around and share my spiritual energy, since I am labeled an empath from my therapist and absorb things. I need to be very
Okay,
careful. I had explained to them everything that had been going on. They made it as clear as day to me about what's going on. It's spiritual welfare. The devil or his demons have been trying to tempt me.
TitleMax, it's the easy way to turn your car or motorcycle title into cash in as little as 30 minutes. And with over 1,100 stores coast to coast, finding your nearest TitleMax is easy. Fill out the online form to get started on your title secured loan or title pawn today.
Census takers will be visiting households to make sure we are counted. Too much is at stake. Respond online today.
Shape your future. Start here.
Happened to me in a span of 7 years. This all happened to me in a span of 7 years. Exactly how long my marriage with my ex-husband lasted in Sacramento, California. The first spiritual advice I ever got was from an old wise woman. She said, "Stay far away from heavily haunted areas. You have a strong magnetism, and they will follow you home and will never leave." I am a very short 25-year-old woman, and at the time I was married to my husband, Keith. I had just started
cool.
going to
I'll
college
check it out later.
and just moved into my first place. It was a small studio that had a half wall with a door and had a sliding wall that folded it into itself to separate the bed. In between the half wall and the bathroom was a walk-in closet we mostly used for storage, and in that closet was the entrance to a shared attic for all 4 apartments, attached to mine.
God.
I remember specifically that it was painted shut with a thin layer keeping it from being opened. I remember that I was pretty uncomfortable with that closet. I couldn't explain why. I tried to stay away from it as much as I could, honestly.
Yeah, I can chip myself a lot too.
One day I had caught a glimpse of the closet light from the other side of the studio through the door being open. I went to go investigate to see if my ex-husband was home. I opened the door. No one was there. As I went to shrug it off and turn off the light, I stepped on something fluffy. I turned the light back on and looked down. Pink fluff. I immediately knew this was insulation. I looked up, and the once painted over square was now cracked and bent open from the inside. And growing up, with my mom, who called herself a Wiccan, she used to use strange spells in her bathroom and collected books on strange moon cycles. She was a hippie back in the 80s and 90s and a huge nudist. I knew when spirits or demonic beings were around.
I have an annoying voice here,
Not
it's
like
okay.
a typical goosebumps type of sense, or a shiver down your spine.
Yes,
But like
it's an
someone
8 thing
broken
too.
inside your home and stole your stuff. It just doesn't feel like your home anymore. I had a pretty bad childhood when my mom started drinking too. And I've seen multiple tall black things staring at me in the middle of the night. Getting back on track, I had put the pieces together and tried to act like nothing happened. I slowly left the closet, closing the door. From then on, I tried to give it the least amount of attention as possible. Eventually, my ex-husband complained about how I left the closet door open all the time, before going to bed, and him having to shut it and clean up after me. I said, "I don't have anything in that closet, and I don't go in there." His eyes widened and he said, "What do you mean you don't go in there? I've been closing that every single night and in the morning." I shook my head, scared, and said, "Do me a favor. Listen to me and do what I say. Go close the door right now and pull on the door and see if it slips open on its own." Okay, he said. Got up and did what I asked. He jolted it back and forth, and it didn't even budge. I then said, "So, remember, we checked it, closed it, and it didn't open, okay? Okay, good night then." He then passed out while I sat up on my phone. An hour later, I
This is a
literally
big
heard
cave.
the doorknob turn and heard the door squeak open. I told my ex-husband to wake up, and he peeked around the corner and ran back like a sissy, whispering, "Oh my freaking god, the door is wide open, what the frick do we do?" The first thing that came to my mind, Sage, we have to sage the house. After heavily saging the house and ignoring the closet hardcore, things calmed down, but the light was always on. A good amount of time passes, and I am now
Yes,
8
very
months
thick.
pregnant with my first son. My ex-husband and I are bringing groceries upstairs, and he runs back down getting the last couple of bags.
It's very
I'm
thick
5
and
feet
juicy.
away, and then suddenly I smell dirt. Similar to what you would smell after fresh rain. I look up, and there it was. Something I was more curious about rather than scared. A very short creature, hunched over with old animal carcasses covering
That's
its
cool.
hips and abdomen. It had a wolf skull.
Yeah, I
with
just got into the
horns,
7th grade,
looking straight at
and I
me
already
while
hate
its
it.
body was facing the wall in my kitchen. I stared at it, grocery bag still in hand,
Yeah,
strangely waiting for it to tell me something.
yes, it's over there,
It just had
on
that
my
feeling.
bed.
It had to tell me something. So I waited. Politely, I guess. It then looked away and walked into the wall, with the last of its wet, muddy back disappearing into nothing. My ex-husband came up into the apartment as I started to cry. I told him everything that happened. Everything I saw. I did some research into Native American folklore, and all the info I could get was that it was something to warn me that I was going to die soon. Fast forward 2 months. I'm now 10 months pregnant, and still no baby. I get induced.
Alright,
No baby.
see you later.
Baby's not getting the oxygen that led to the emergency C-section. The doctor then tells me, if this were a decade or
Happy
so ago,
birthday.
you and the baby would have died. I like to believe that the thing was there to warn me, that it quite literally was waiting for me to die. I never saw it again after that moment. Fast forward some time. The closet thing comes back. My ex-husband now goes into basic training. I'm completely home alone. Water bottles start getting thrown. Christmas trees wouldn't stay up overnight. Knives were being pulled out of a knife block, and of course, waking up in the middle of the night at strange hours. For no apparent reason. The house gets blessed, and my ex-husband comes back. We moved 2 states away for orders. It's now 3 years later. We get a house on base, and I just gave birth to our second child. The first child is with our grandparents for about 3 months. I start to wonder if I have any Native American heritage, but I'm too scared to get a test done. A lot of weird things start happening in the house. The fact that I had known already that heavily wooded houses had a lot of residual energy in them. The house was built in the 50s, a small condominium 2-story house with 2 windows facing into the backyard of a 3 square mile dense set of woods. Beautiful during the day, but absolutely terrifying if you forget to close the windows at night. The floors were hardwood, and there were large beams holding the kitchen together. Over the months, my ex-husband and I start to tell each other things that both happened to us while we were home alone. We thought that we were only experiencing them ourselves. Large footsteps would walk in the hallway upstairs. It would sound like people were having conversations in empty rooms we used for storage. Spirits literally were spinning our swivel chair like crazy. All of the above, except nothing felt malevolent. Not to mention we saw what we thought was a ghost. It was like a mist with a white aura around it. After talking about it, my ex-husband was then told that our specific set of houses were built on an old Native American burial ground. Fantastic. Just my luck. Then, on another long night of video games and snacks, I forgot to close the blinds in the living room. I was thirsty and went to the kitchen and caught a glimpse of something glowing with my right eye. I look out the back bay windows and I see a huge, at least 13 to 15 foot tall bear thing, standing on its hind legs just staring into my windows. Both of its eyes were glowing white. I was frozen in shock, and it felt like we were sitting there for hours because my legs started to hurt by the time I looked away. When I came to, I immediately called my ex-husband, who was an MP, and told him to come home as fast as he could. He rushed over in no more than 5 minutes and said there was a mother bear and 2 cubs spotted in the woods nearby. Why did it stop like that? Why was it so frightening there watching me? Why were its eyes glowing white? I don't know. None of this made any sense to me. I want to make myself believe that some spirit has been keeping an eye on me for a while, for whatever reason, but I I just don't have anything better. I don't know what to make of all of this. I think I might be haunted. I've experienced more things out there, but these are the main ones that have freaked me out. I think things do follow me, whether it be spirits, creatures, animals, whatever. If anybody has any more insight on what may be happening to me, please comment them down below. It's been a number of days since my family and I have been laid off or have been forced to work from home. We live in a rural town near the Rocky Mountains, and we have just gotten our first case of COVID-19 2 weeks ago. Despite being nearly in the middle of nowhere, my family has been surprisingly in good spirits though, and my 2 dogs couldn't be more happy to have company 24/7. For the first few days I didn't mind. I got more opportunities to work on projects and build my art and photography portfolios. On our 6th day, I noticed something strange in my area when I went to take a walk and take some photos. Our backyard juts into foothills and onto hiking trails claimed by our town. I always use the trails for photos, either capturing the beautiful landscape shots of my area or, if I'm lucky, animal photos. The fence of my backyard is old and tall, at least 7 feet tall. This will be of importance later. The gate creaks every time I open it, scaring off birds and rodents pretty much without fail. You can tell by the rustling of trees and bushes. What made it already feel like an off day is that nothing made a sound when I opened the gate, and it made that god-awful noise. It just echoed into the wilderness. Then, absolute silence. Eerie, but I didn't think anything of it like a moron. I could hear every crunch of branches and leaves that I stepped on, better than I ever could before. I wasn't going to be long as it was getting late, and I had to go eat dinner soon. Another red flag was that I didn't see a single soul on the path. It's normally got a few people on it, and thanks to the virus bringing out the stupid in people, it usually had plenty of folks blocking the roads, not practicing social distancing or anything like that because it was the countryside. I didn't think anything of it, really. I didn't think anything bad, in fact, could even happen. I was actually thinking this was a blessing, that it was actually empty for one. I continued to jog upwards, still only hearing me and me alone, to a lookout spot that is normally littered by tourists and hikers alike. Seeing it was clear from below, I was somewhat out of breath upon reaching the lookout point, sucking in air with some light wheezing. I took in my view. The setting sun shone upon my town, and I didn't need to worry about the sun getting in my shot. As I prepared my camera, I heard the sound that still makes me shudder to this day. It was the sound of my gate, opening up, off tune, coming from a different path on my right. I was no longer alone. Branches snapped as I heard what sounded like something shuffling around on the ground, coming from the same area I just was in. I knew it was no echo. Whatever made that sound did it again, and my head snapped in the direction of the noise. I couldn't make out what it was, as it was getting darker very rapidly. I saw something, with bone-thin limbs thumping the ground around it. I decided that was enough for me. I ran all the way to my house. I heard the thumping sound in the distance, but not very close, thankfully. I slammed my gate shut and caught my breath. I saw my family staring at me through the window, looking rather concerned. I bolted inside and locked the doors and covered the windows. My dogs went crazy, hair raised on the both of them. I did my best to hush them. They knew something was wrong. Good dogs they are. I explained what I saw and what I heard to my family, but the only one who actually took it seriously was my older brother. He had always believed in cryptids. He gave me flack for not taking photos of the beast, but I was honestly too scared. Honestly, in that moment, all I could think was to fight or flight. And I wasn't planning on fighting whatever that thing was with a camera. I got one of my dogs to sleep on my bed with me that night, to alert me if anything happened, as well as the standard emotional support. I got Seed, my pit bull. She's normally docile and loves nothing more than to cuddle. But considering she went bonkers when I got home, I figured she'd be a perfect watchdog. My room is upstairs, and I cracked my window open to see if I could catch a glimpse. I had my doubts this creature could climb. My brother told me to call him on his cell phone if we saw anything, as he was going to be drinking and Skyping his friend downstairs. I already had a hard time falling asleep earlier that night, but I eventually managed to. It was short-lived, however. At about 12:20 a.m., Seed started to growl. It was low, but it was enough to wake me up. I saw her head facing my window instead of me. She was sitting up. I gave her a kiss.
Yeah,
hushed
it's a
her.
podcast.
She quickly went back to growling. Getting extremely nervous, I cocooned us in my blanket and slowly crept toward my window.
Oh!
I didn't initially see anything in the backyard.
Holy
Yet,
crap.
it didn't take long before I heard something from outside. It was the sound of me wheezing earlier, or at least a cheap imitation of it. It was definitely a lot louder than my panting from the lookout point from earlier. I frantically scanned the yard, looking for the source of the sound. Seed was growing louder,
Oh.
which didn't help the situation at all. I noticed something moving alongside the fence very slowly and very purposely. On the other side of the property, at the base of my window, all I could make out was something crawling, with bone-thin arms and legs. It was a brighter color. My guess is it was gray. It was hard to tell at night. I laid back on the bed, not wanting to be seen, and called my brother. He picked up immediately. I quickly explained to him what I was seeing. Within just a few minutes, he had hung up on his friends, shut down all the lights downstairs, and was up in my room. I urged for him to crawl so he wouldn't be seen. I could tell he was nervous too.
Ooh.
After hushing the dog
Holy
once
crap.
more, my brother could make out the eerie sounds the thing outside
Oh, that's
was
just my
making.
face cam.
I had noticed a pungent smell starting to waft into the room. I
That's just my
suspected it
face
must be
cam.
coming from this thing. Silently, my
Yes,
brother
that is
urged me
my
to
face
close
cam. That is what I look like in
something
real
I
life.
probably should have done sooner. I made an effort, but the cold night had caused the window to go stiff. It let out a squeak before it shut.
Yes, I am an e-girl.
Unfortunately, it was too loud. I guess the creature heard it. We watched as it stood upright. It was at least a foot taller than our fence. It was humanoid in shape, with wrinkly skin and mangy hair patches. Its head looked like that of a human's, but bald, with almost bat-like ears and a full mouth of jagged, crooked teeth. Its jaw was slacked, and a long
Alright, zombie
tongue
spawner.
came hanging out. It was drooling on the face. It was fixated on my window. My brother and I hid, both doing our best not to scream or cry. Seed began whimpering,
I
flashing as my
suck.
brother muzzled her with his hands. I heard Rocket, our other dog downstairs, going crazy, barking at the back door and pawing at it. I was tempted to go down there and bring her up here too, when I heard the sound of wood creaking, and I frantically closed the curtains. I noticed it looked brighter outside, and I heard a familiar clicking sound, like that of a flashlight turning on. I formed a peephole with the lower part of the curtain, against my brother's decision, and looked outside. A motion light tripped, revealing this thing even better. Its eyes were black, with the glint of light reflecting from the motion lights. Made them look like obsidian balls. Its torso had reached onto the top of the fence, with one arm touching the grass in our yard. Holy crap. The claws on it weren't large, but they were caked in dried blood, and definitely sharp. It was no longer looking at us, but looking at the light. It covered its eyes and let out a shriek that sounded like something between a cougar scream and a sheep's cry. It slunk back, and I watched it crawl away into the bushes. I had a gut feeling it wouldn't return that night, and thankfully I'm pretty sure it never did. I never ended up sleeping through the night. I made sure to spoil Seed for the next few days to make up for rudely having to muzzle her so much. I went out the next morning to look at where this thing was. The drool it left was there and smelled absolutely vile, like compost you'd forgotten to take out for several months mixed with expired milk. The fence looked like
It
it was
is
in
about
stable
pursuit
condition
points.
at least. My brother wishes we had captured it on camera. It dawned on me that my father has one of those motion capture trail cams that people use to document wildlife.
Thank
I
you
went
for
to
that.
dig it up myself, as I doubt he'd let me use it for a purpose he didn't believe in. I've been going out less and less on those trails, and I stopped going altogether during sunset. I don't want to take any risk. I've been leaving lanterns out on our fence to deter this monster. I know it's still out there, though. Last evening, just after sunset, we all heard the off-tuned creak of our gate echoing in the distance. My name is Richard, and this is a story that took place when I was in the Navy. This paranormal event happened around 2006 or 2007. To give you some backstory, the way everything makes sense, and hopefully answers everybody's questions, I'm going to explain some details about the ship this took place on, and the previous events. All that aside, let's begin. This story takes place on the USS Trenton, LPD-14. It was an amphibious landing ship commissioned in, I believe, 1962. I was stationed on this ship for about 1.5 years till we decommissioned it and sold it to the Indian Navy. I worked as a machinist mate in the engine room, or pit as we called it. I worked in one of the 2 engine rooms on board, one called the forward engine room and the other called the aft engine room. The reason being is that one sat a little more towards the front of the ship, hence the name forwards and aft, as well as the engine room. Each one was equipped with a main engine and a shaft that ran, let's say 100 feet or so. So, to support these shafts there were huge bearings that held into place. These sat in a place we called Shaft Alley. To gain access to this alley, you had to climb down a 30-foot ladder to reach a long dome-shaped alley that ran about 70 feet or so. Now that you understand a little bit about the ship, I'll tell you the first part of the story. Back in 1962, when the ship was newly commissioned, it was undergoing quite a bit of deployment. We have to break the ship in, so to speak. Well, during this cruise, the aft engine room had a major steam leak on the main steam pipe. No big deal, right? Yeah, think again. These pipes were pumping steam out at 650 psi, at anywhere between 900 and 960 degrees. We were always told if a major steam leak happened, we only had a few seconds to get to the emergency space hatch, or we would be steamed alive like a lobster. In this case, 2 bolts broken on a flange, so initially the leak was only minor, and the crew decided to continue to sail on and to operate the boiler. Wrong decision. Shortly after, the pipe ruptured, killing several sailors. Now, this is where the story gets odd, as I can verify the previous part through research, but not the upcoming part. Apparently, just before the pipe blew, the chief on watch had left the space for just a moment, which spared him from the horrible death his shipmates suffered. However, stricken with grief, he allegedly hung himself from a ladder in the aft shaft alley. Now that you understand this, please understand that everything I just told you about the steam leak and the chief hanging himself was unbeknownst to me when I arrived on the ship. I never knew any of this until I had my paranormal experience, and I worked up the nerve to talk to someone about it. My experience starts like this. I was on restricted maneuvering watch inside the aft shaft alley one afternoon. Basically, I have to sit down there and watch the shaft as the ship made various turns quickly. If anything were to happen to a bearing or something else, I was supposed to report it ASAP. Well, watch can be boring. I just did plenty of watch in both shaft alleys, and it is easy to fall asleep. Especially the forward shaft alley, since it was dimly lit and painted dark colors. Varys, the bright white white painted and well-lit aft shaft alley. Regardless of this, I felt myself starting to want to drift off. However, I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. At first, I shrugged it off as nothing. After a while, though, this feeling grew and grew. And after, let's say, probably an hour or so, I felt that something was glaring at me from a corner of the alley. The weird part, though, is that this part of the alley, despite the bright lights and white walls, maintained a perpetual state of darkness. At this point, I felt whatever was watching me. I felt like it wanted to hurt me. I couldn't keep my eyes off that corner, and fear started to swell within me. Despite this, I stayed there, motionless, unblinking, watching this corner. After what felt like an eternity, I got a message through our sound-powered telephones, securing me from the watch. Without missing a beat, I turned heel and ran for the ladder. As I climbed the ladder about halfway up, I felt something latch onto my shoulders. It felt like a person had grabbed my shoulders and was trying to pull me down. I could physically feel fingers digging into my shoulders. Panicking now, I felt adrenaline surge through me, and I pulled and half-clambered my way up the ladder and heaved myself through the hatch. The crazy part, as soon as I got through the hatch, the feeling went away. Scared, I didn't speak this to anyone for fear of being made fun of. It wasn't until I heard a buddy of mine talking about it that I opened up, and he told me about the accident back in the 60s. He told me he had a paranormal experience down there too, and refused to go down there ever since. This part of my life still haunts me to this day, but despite this, I love sharing it with people. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true stories sent in by viewers just like you.
Oh.
The Unexplained Story series is getting very close to 30 episodes. So, today we're on episode 29. I hope you enjoy these creepy and downright unexplainable stories sent in by viewers just like you. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit yours at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. Now, without further ado, let's get into these creepy and unexplained stories. This isn't a story about me, but rather about my father. My father is a very logical and rational man who, generally speaking, does not believe in the paranormal. He thinks he can explain ghosts. This experience, however, forever changed him, and he still has no explanation for it to this day. It was in the 1970s, I believe. He was driving along the highway in New Jersey when he happened to look up at the sky and he noticed something unusual. It was a strange set of lights, or what he thought were lights. He described them as looking like strange, floating bubbles of light that turned different colors from orange to red to yellow, then to green. He watched them for several minutes, noticing that there was no sound to them.
At SteelSeries, we solve problems. Not
Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. Today we are once again going to be sharing some creepy and allegedly true stories sent in by viewers just like you. This time is from deep within the woods while camping. If you have a camping story that you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this channel going. Joining me today reading story number 2 is my friend, Dead Leaf Clover. She has a great voice and a new channel that she narrates quite a few things on. So, if you enjoy her voice, please show her some support and check her out. You can find the link to this on the top of the description. Before we jump into this unsolved mystery, though, I just wanted to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, who made my peeps so airquake the 50 to bloom. You don't know me, but I've been a big fan for a very long time. Anyway, I have a story. My family and I go camping every year in Money Creek, past Index in Washington. This happened 2 years ago, and it's still something that bothers me deeply, as I was only 16 at the time it happened. Here's some.
Dame, dame, dame yo, dame, dame yo, dame, dame. Sukite, suki, sunzen, dotka, sonachi no san de kete ho, kanete yo, hoping at you, bakamitai.
Background though. It was windy and cold. I believe fall was right around the corner because we were late for camping. I only remember this because the air was crisp. I woke up at around 3 in the morning. I looked at my phone and after I adjusted to being blinded, I saw it was only a few minutes past. My family was asleep, so I thought it was a perfect time to smoke a cigarette. We were in the multifamily site, so being across from the bathrooms gave me a good excuse to leave. I grabbed my last smoke and took off after bundling up, hooking a right and following the road to the other side of the grounds. As I started smoking, I started to get this feeling of kind of feeling sick. Dreadful even. Coming up on the other side of the bathrooms, I stopped and looked around. As I felt something was wrong in the air, I peered over my shoulder, looking deep into the pitch black green belt. There was the silhouette of a man. I think. It was darker than the blackness around it, and I froze. I looked about an inch up, where a face should have been.
Yeah, he's disgusting.
All I saw were 2 white dots, and they were staring into me. Staring straight into my soul.
Sorry.
I went to step back, but I heard a whisper behind me. It was so close it seemed like it was everywhere, but I had a feeling I needed to run, so I did. I turned heel so fast I almost tripped and dropped my cigarette. The thing was only halfway done, but I wasn't going back for it. I was sprinting so hard I was choking on the cold air and got tunnel vision. What seemed like an absolute eternity later, which couldn't have been more than 5 minutes, I was finally back at the campsite. I practically dived into my tent and curled up in a ball. I didn't tell my mother about it until about a month ago. I didn't tell her about the man in the woods with the glowing white eyes.
I'm a little nervous to share this story because I've never shared it with anyone, not even my family. Anyway, I'm a girl and I live in this intense temperature on the top of my waist.
Real gaming when I got a PS. 5th grade was one hell of a year for me. Geometry Dash 2.0 and Minecraft 1.9 were released. I got my first taste of real gaming when I got a PS4 for Christmas, and I even switched schools halfway through the year, causing me to meet a lot of new people, and a lot of my new friends who would become the basis of my social circle that would eventually lead me to become one of the more popular kids in my high school today. However, I also had a pretty creepy encounter with some random guy that year too. Back in November of 2015, when I was in 5th grade, my family and I went on a road trip through Texas, stopping at various camping sites. Our first stop was at Sonora State Park. We stayed there for one night and would be leaving the next morning to go to Balmorhea State Park. The next morning, I went on a bike ride to the restroom and saw a random guy waving at me from his campsite. Taking this as a friendly gesture, I waved back at him and continued on pedaling down to the bathrooms. I did my business and started to bike back to my campsite when the same guy shouted, "Hey kid, over here." I slowed down to a stop but kept my distance because of the stranger danger. "Yeah?" I shouted back. The guy said, "Do you have a girlfriend?" And I replied, "No." He then said, "Well, I have my daughter down here with me, and I can hook you up with her. Why don't you come down here so you can meet her?" The guy had nothing set up. No tent, no trailer, and the only thing that was at his campsite was a truck with clear windows. I did not see a girl at all. This realization sent a sudden rush of horror through me, so I yelled, "I'm fine," started pedaling slowly, and then eventually fully booking it out of there back to my campsite. I told my dad, and he said it was probably nothing, and didn't do anything about it. This story still creeps me out to this day, because that guy probably had malicious intentions. Shame that there's a lot of people like this in the world. I know it's not the scariest story.
Hey.
Thanks for sharing it anyway.
Got it. I'm not really hungry.
For later?
But later, yeah, like,
What?
if you could get some ramen, that'd be nice.
This is a long one, but I promise it's worth the read. It really freaked me out at the time. If anyone has a solid idea of what this was, or if they had a similar experience, I would love to hear it. This happened to me a while back when I decided to go on another camping trip alone. I always liked camping alone. There's something serene and sobering about being isolated in the middle of wilderness, and I always found it relaxing. So I planned out what trail I was going to take, packed my camping gear and my rifle for protection, and jumped in my truck. I get to this trail early in the morning and hike at about 15 to 20 miles in until I find the right spot, and head off the trail to find a place to put my tent up. I stumble upon this nice-sized clearing and decide that it's a nice, beautiful spot to settle down. I'm exhausted at this point, but set up the tent at the southernmost edge of the clearing. I wanted to make sure I was next to the tree line. I managed to get a fire going. I roast some weenies and start to hear a sound in the distance underneath all the forest noise. It sounded like an animal, most likely a deer, with a lame leg, as it sounded like the animal was making a walking or dragging noise. I felt bad for the poor guy, but it was too far away and it was getting dark, so I couldn't go really find it and put it out of its misery. I think nothing of it, and go eat my food. After I eat, I douse the fire and crawl into my tent and insert myself into my sleeping bag. I decided
should probably
that
take
even
your
at my
saddle.
exhausted and relaxed state, I can't go to sleep, so I pull out a book I brought with me and start to read it by the light of the lamp. Hours go by and I hear that sound again. This time, much closer, right at the opposite side of the clearing. Surprised, I put my book down and listen to this animal walk across the clearing towards my tent. It's really loud at this point, and it now sounds like the hooves are all being heavily planted, with the dragging noise following seconds after, like this deer is dragging something along. It makes it to about what I assume the middle of the clearing and stops, and I hear nothing. No breathing. I mean, just not a sound from this animal. I unzip the tent and look into the clearing. Nothing but trees and darkness. What the hell? Unnerved at this point, I zip the tent back up and sit there listening for other noises. Nothing. Just the crickets and the breeze. I decide that there are a lot of strange noises in the woods, and tried not to let it bother me. Besides, I had a rifle. I start to doze off when I hear men's laughter off in the distance to my right, then women's laughter and sticks snapping off to my far left. I'm up now, wondering if what I am hearing is really what I'm hearing or just a product of being half asleep. I hear more faint laughing from a couple of other different directions, all different, like old men, old women, even children. This confirms to me that it's real and I'm not just hearing things. The noises are closing in, and I grab my rifle preparing to fire a warning shot off in the air in case they came way too close. Something about this laughter, how far in I was, the noise earlier, and the time of night told me that this was not just another family strolling through. I was on edge enough already, but then I noticed that the nightlife was dead quiet. Not even the wind was making any noise. I decided enough was enough. I unzipped the tent and fired a shot off into the night. I sat there and surveyed the tree line, saw nothing, and listened intently to my surroundings. No laughing and the forest sounds had returned. Relaxing just a bit and figuring that whatever was there was scared off, I sat down in my exhausted state and fell asleep. I woke up later in a cold sweat, racked with anxiety, and it was still dark outside. I immediately hear two people whispering not too far from my tent. Alert, I grab my rifle and listen to what they are saying. I can't make out much, but I hear something about being lost, so I shout, "Hey, who's there?" The voices fall silent. I shout out again, "Are you guys lost? Who's there?" Suddenly, a huge burst of flame like a flamethrower erupted from the middle of the clearing, illuminating several silhouettes of people just standing around. In shock, I fired my rifle, blowing a hole in front of my tent. Without checking my surroundings, I get up and sprint out of my tent, making a hard left back to where the trail was. I hiked until sunrise, back to my truck, with my head over my shoulder the entire time. Never heard anyone follow me, never saw anyone or anything the whole way, but couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. After that, my enjoyment of camping alone left me, like I left all my gear in the woods that night. From 1993 to 1998, every summer I attended a Christian youth camp for girls. The camp lasted 4 days, 3 nights. There were about 200 girls at the camp, and it was about a 1.5 to 2 hour drive away from our homes. Some of the camping areas were tent only, others had A-frames, and at least one of the camping areas had longhouses. The campground is called Ensign Ranch. You can look online to see pictures of what these different camping areas look like. It's really a safe campground, and we had a lot of fun every year. In the evenings, we would tell spooky stories. Pretty typical stuff for youth camps. Apologies for the long story, though. I want the details to be clear. On the last night of camp in 1996, I was 15 at the time, there were several of us girls on the top level of our longhouse. It was past bedtime, so we were quietly telling scary stories. I had told a couple at that point. One with the help of a friend, I'll call her Lily. I don't remember the specific stories from that night, just typical, "and the hook was hanging from the car door" type stuff. After a couple of hours of spooky stories, someone else was talking, and I was getting really tired and could hardly keep my eyes open anymore. Then, some of the girls asked me to tell one more story. So I start telling a story, making it up as I go. Just typical, "on a dark night, in the woods not far from here" type of beginning. Next thing I know, I wake up, lying flat on my back. As I'm walking, I realize I'm still talking. But once I became aware of my own talking, I couldn't remember what I was saying or trying to say. I was fully awake then. I finished by lamely saying something like, "They all died. The end." I looked around at the other girls who were all staring wide-eyed at me. A couple of girls were quietly crying, mouths open in horror with tears streaming down their faces. My friend Lily whispered, "That was the creepiest thing I've ever heard." The girls that weren't crying nodded in agreement. I said it was tired and we should all go to bed. As all the other girls moved away to their sleeping bags, I asked Lily and another girl, I'll call her Sarah, what I had said. I admitted to them that I had fallen asleep and couldn't remember anything. Lily and Sarah exchanged glances, and Lily paused before saying, "That just makes it worse." Sarah nodded in agreement. She said she didn't want to retell it because it was that creepy. Now at this point, if it had just been Lily or one or two other girls that were in the group, I would have thought they realized I was asleep, and maybe they were just messing with me. Sarah was, and still is, very serious. She doesn't really have that kind of sense of humor. She doesn't like pranks, even innocent ones. She's probably almost honest, almost to a fault. So, I went to sleep feeling unnerved but exhausted. A few hours later, I was being shaken awake by one of the adult camp leaders. She told me to gather my things and follow her. I sleepily and awkwardly carried my stuff down the ladder, then followed her outside. Two other camp leaders were standing next to a tent. They told me to put my items inside, then come to talk to them. Inside the tent were two of the younger girls, 12 or 13, that had been listening to the scary stories and who had been crying when I woke up. They wouldn't look at me, just lay there sobbing. When I went back outside to talk to the leaders, they said Lily had shown up at their tent with the two sobbing girls. The girls were crying and kept saying they wanted their parents to come get them. Lily explained the scary stories and about mine being the one that made them cry. The leaders asked what I had said. I admitted I'd fallen asleep and honestly didn't know. The leader said Lily refused to tell them what I had said, and the two girls just sobbed harder the more they tried to talk to them. They explained to the girls that they weren't going to call and wake up their parents at 3 a.m. and have them drive over an hour just because of spooky stories. Plus, we were all going home the next day anyway. As punishment for scaring the girls, the leaders made me sleep in the tent with them while the leaders went to sleep in the longhouse. The girls cried for a bit and then we all fell asleep. They were both gone from the tent when I woke in the morning. To this day, I have no idea what creepy story I told. No one that was there has ever been willing to tell me any of the details. Several years afterward, Lily told me that she would randomly have nightmares because of it. The only other details I was able to get answered were, my voice sounded the same as usual, my eyes remained closed for the majority of it, which creeped them out even more, and the story was coherent and made sense up until the end when I had lamely finished speaking. Again, if it had only been Lily and a few other girls, I wouldn't have been thinking that they were screwing with me. Sarah and most of the other girls that were there, though, including the one that cried most of the night, even being a part of a prank on me just doesn't seem probable. I'm from Belfast, Ireland. I have a large group of friends, and we would always have sleepovers at my house. This is the story of how one camp out at my back garden went all wrong. I live in a nice... One camp out at my back garden went all wrong. I live in a...
So, we all know that some foods make us gain weight, and some foods are definitely healthier than others. But what I didn't know until recently was that there are some foods that have an insanely high thermic effect, while some foods have none. And thermic effect is just...
I live in a nice neighborhood, mostly with old people in it. It was around Easter, and in my school, we get a week and a half off with the Easter break. Just before school ended, we decided to have a camp out in my back garden, because I recently got a new tent that could fit probably my whole entire friend group into it. It was the Saturday after we finished, and we all met up at my house around 7 o'clock. We ordered pizza, made marshmallows around the fire, and all in all, we had fun. At around 12:30, we decided to crawl into the tent and play some card games as it was getting quite cold outside. I dealt all 13 decks and we began a game of Jack. After around 5 different card games, we all ordered some food and climbed into bed to wait on it coming. We got a text message saying it would be there in around 40 minutes, so we all could relax for a while. The food came and we all went outside to sit around the fire to eat it. I have a large back garden, and we were at the bottom of it, so we weren't afraid of waking up my parents by singing and talking loudly. After finishing our food, we got back into the tent and decided to get some rest. When everyone had drifted off to sleep, I was awoken by a strange sound, a sort of whistling sound. I brushed it off as being me dreaming, but around 2 minutes later, there it was again. Every 2 minutes or so it would happen. Just kind of the same, over and over. I woke up my friend and told her to listen. Straight after I said that, there was a different kind of whistle, and it came from the other side of the tent. This was when we decided to wake everyone up. After around 10 minutes of listening to the whistling going back and forth, we heard footsteps coming from behind the tent. The crunching of leaves made us all fall silent. We were still as rocks, not moving an inch. 1, 2, 3, run, I whispered in a frantic voice. All 13 of us sprinted the 15 seconds to my back door. We unlocked the door with my key that my mama gave us, and we all ran in. We looked out the window, and all could have just slightly make out 3 human figures at the bottom of my garden. We all slept in the living room that night, and I've never had another camp out in my back garden again. It probably isn't that creepy, but it freaked us out. My parents owned a house across the street from the campground. The campground was relatively small, but had a huge forest attached to it. Beside that campground was a narrow, fast-moving river. Our best friends Katie and Debbie were around the same age as my sister and I. Every time we had a sleepover or a playdate, we would wander across the street and try to camp there. We had to go up a berm, over the metal barrier into the campground, to explore the forest. Our adventures always involved spy games, hide-and-go-seek, and another, Katie and Debbie called the Black Witch. Katie and Debbie's mom would tell us stories of the Black Witch lurking in the shadows of the pine trees, kidnapping young girls to eat and curse the ones that got away. So as kids, we decided to find this witch, of course only thinking it was all a tall tale, fabricated for our horror, so we wouldn't wander off the path in the forest or go too far away from our campsites. One day we set out on our adventure through the forest at dusk to find the Black Witch. So up the berm and over the metal barrier we went. The golden hour, as they called it, had blinked the forest. The golden light had cast eerie shadows down the path we wandered. This was it, we thought. We were gonna finally catch her. Equipped with our sticks, flashlights, and walkie-talkies, we called out, "Black Witch, come show yourself," into the shadows. Katie thought if we split up into groups, we would be covering more ground probably, and find the witch much easier. So Katie and I, being the 2 oldest of the group, wandered ahead, chanting, "Black Witch, Black Witch, Black Witch, show yourself," in hopes of scaring Debbie and my little sister to run home. Katie and I would crack sticks against trees, rustling leaves, and laugh like we were the witch. The walkie-talkie cracks on and we hear a scream from the other end. "Help! She's got Debbie and me!" Laughing to ourselves, Katie jokes, "They're just messing with us. Come on, let's keep wandering." About 10 minutes later, the walkie-talkie cracks on. "Help! She has us!" Still laughing at what we thought was a joke, the walkie-talkie beeps, cracks, and makes an ear-splitting hiss. A gut-wrenching laughter comes through that is neither Debbie or my sister's voice, then speaks, "Oh, children are such tasty treats. Their bones grind into a fine paste, their blood into wine. Come find me if you dare." Katie and I panic. What the heck? Katie, this isn't a joke. Who's that voice? Katie laughs. It's a joke, trust me. There's no such thing as witches. It's a story my mom tells so we won't get lost in the forest. Come on, let's get back to your house. I'm sure Debbie and your sister will be there. We probably scared them and your mom is trying to play tricks on us to come home. Just then, a branch behind us snaps and an evil laugh erupts from the woods. The same voice that came through the walkie-talkie speaks, "Such tasty children you must be." We turn to see a long black cloak coming through the trees, and we hear Debbie and my sister screams of fear. The dark cloak moves faster towards us, laughing maniacally. We run and run, zipping back home, making it through the house, crying in fear, to see Debbie and my sister watching a movie. "We thought the Black Witch got you," Katie cries. Debbie and my sister turn to see our tear-soaked faces. What? We turned back home when we saw you guys were trying to scare us, Debbie says. Then why were you guys screaming on the walkie-talkie that the witch got you? I cry to them. Haha, yeah, we do that to mess with you too, my sister states matter-of-factly. Then who was the voice on the walkie-talkie talking about eating children? We ask. We actually lost the walkie-talkie on the way back to the house. You guys are losing it, Debbie laughs. We saw her. She came charging through the trees after us. We thought she had you guys. She was coming to eat us. Kitty cries. I nod in agreement. Alright, enough with trying to scare us. There's no such thing as the Black Witch, my sister states. We sat back down trying to calm down. Then the walkie-talkie snaps. Haha, you guys sure do look tasty. Why didn't you want to find me? It was the summer of 2016 and I had just married my longtime girlfriend. Over the course of the 12-year relationship we had traveled to the mountains several times in the both summer and winter times for camping, but also to stay in nice mountain hotels and snowboard the slopes. Naturally, we both agreed this was how we wanted to spend the first few weeks of our marriage. We booked a 20-day stay at a mountainside campground on the other side of the country. We also decided to bring our dogs with us as they have a love for being outside too, and we generally bring them camping anyway. After 2 days of road tripping, we had arrived, quickly set up and settled in for a good long stay on the mountain. It was beautiful. A couple of days into our trip, we had already met a bunch of fellow campers. We are very experienced campers, so we generally attract a lot of attention from novice campers asking for tools or supplies as they see we are all very well set up. We are usually more than happy to help people get situated if they need matches, cream, or sugar, or help setting up their equipment. It was day 4 or 5 when she first made her presence known to us. I will refer to this person as she or her, as we never learned her name. We were sitting down under the shade of a large pine tree at the edge of our site, drinking beers and playing cards, when she seemingly appeared out of nowhere. She was just suddenly right there. "Can I pet your dog?" she asked. Even my dogs didn't see her approach, as the very sound of her voice triggered them into a startled frenzy. As the dogs were worked up already, I politely told her no. Then she just stood there, at the edge of our sight, not saying a word. Just standing there, sort of existing, but not really doing anything. She wasn't exactly staring at us or looking at anything in particular. I asked her if she needed anything, and then she said no. After a few minutes, she...
Census takers will be visiting households to make sure we are counted, because an undercounted community could miss out on billions of funding. Too much is at stake.
Walked off. I work with people with brain injuries, so I've had my fair share of experiences with unusual behaviors, including people with poor social skills, so I wasn't about to write this person off as creepy just yet. But she had my attention. I casually watched her walk off and enter a campsite across the path and a few sites down from ours. There were already a small tent set up in that site, but she proceeded to pull out an even smaller tent from her backpack and began setting it up. The day prior, we saw 2 young girls set up the other tent and were clearly the occupants of the site. There was no further interaction with her that day, although we did notice that the others of the other tent on the site were not around all day, and we didn't see them return that night. Well, the next morning I am walking to the camp showers to clean up for the day. As I walk past her site, I see she is sitting in her tent, reading a book. The door to the tent is open. I pay no attention and keep on my way to the shower. When I'm done with my shower and walking back, I notice her tent is now closed and is jiggling about, so I know someone is in there. Then she made her presence known in a big way. Just as I'm about to approach her site, on the way to mine, she unzips her tent, and I immediately see that she is completely nude. She then positions herself just inside the tent at the door, and lets out this over-the-top, full-body stretch and held her arms way up in the sky, pushing her chest forward like it was some kind of mating ritual designed just for me. While she does this, she lets out what I can only describe as an exotic moan. It was pretty obvious she was putting on a show for me. I continue on my way to my site and tell my wife about the display I had just been witness to. We both laughed it off and moved on with our plans. We wanted to go hike a good trail to a waterfall. The trailhead for this hike was accessible from the campgrounds, so we decided to have a drive to get there. We just walked the additional 2 kilometers to the trail. We walked at a good pace, so when we got to the trail, we decided to stop for a few minutes and take some photos of the surrounding mountains before heading into the thicker brush. After sitting there for maybe 5 minutes while my wife is taking pictures, she emerges from the trail and leads towards the campground. At first, I thought, okay, maybe she was just hiking and this is a coincidence. She's staying here and this is a pretty common trail. But then she sees that I see her, and she stops dead in her tracks and just stands there. Same demeanor as our first encounter. Just standing, not doing anything in particular, also sending creep vibes our way. This was the first time I had said to my wife, I think we have a stalker. Confused, my wife then looks to where I am looking and she's immediately a little creeped out. Once again, I think, whatever, maybe she's just hiking the trail, no big deal. So, we continue on the trail at a good pace and she maintains a consistent distance behind us. Our dogs at this point are a little distracted by her, and our youngest dog keeps turning around to watch her. I get a little fed up with the dog constantly stopping to look back, so I decided we would stop for some water and let this woman pass. Well, what does she do? But freaking stops walking when we stop and once again just stands there. So now we are genuinely concerned because this is approaching horror suspense movie creep levels, and I start to wonder what this girl's intentions are. Standing motionless at that distance and refusing to pass us just ramped up the oh crap factor to about 9. So my wife and I agreed to just give up and cut the hike short by taking a shorter loop, which is only another half kilometer ahead, and head back to our camp. We managed to get some distance between us by jogging every time we would make a turn, and she was out of sight. We didn't see her again until later that night. That night, my wife decided to take an evening shower at the camp showers. When she returned to our camp, she tells me our stalker was in the bathrooms, also taking a shower. This time, however, she was with 2 other girls, appeared to be getting ready for the night at the club. There's a nearby ski town that has a few nightclubs and bars, so it was reasonable to see the girls were getting ready for a night out. The 2 girls she was with were the 2 we saw previously set up at her site. My wife explains that she quickly picked up on the fact that the 2 girls of our stalker friend were not well known to each other. It was clear that the 2 girls were just close friends with plans to go out partying, and our stalker was making an attempt at being friends, and sort of invited herself to join them in their night out. Now, we know the ski town well, and the girls kept reinforcing that they were meeting at a specific restaurant before going to the bar. It was currently 10:30 p.m., and we know the restaurant they were going to go to would close at 10. They were lying at their plans, probably to throw off the stalker. The stalker kept asking them too, "Are you sure this place? Are you sure?" They convinced her, and she then left to her tent to finish getting ready for the place while the 2 friends stayed in the bathroom to finish up their makeup. My wife went on to explain how after she left, the 2 friends were mocking and making fun of our stalker. They were young 20-somethings acting like little girls in elementary school. My wife has no time for that. Creepy stalker or not, she had to say something to the girls for their behavior. My wife calls them out on their behavior. Well, putting all the catty, stupid bullying aside, the girls explained to my wife that the stalker had set up at their tent on their site when they were staying with a friend at the ski town. When they returned, they found her living at their site without invitation. She had just taken it upon herself to take a little corner of their site without knowing them at all. The girls said they were upset with her and trying to make her feel uncomfortable so she would leave, but she wouldn't leave. Of course, my wife asked them why they didn't just report her to the park warden. The excuse they gave me was that they were leaving the next day and didn't want to make a huge deal out of it. So whatever happened between them and that fake late dinner plans and clubbing is unknown to us. At about 3 a.m., that same night, we were all awoken to a blood-curdling scream outside of our camper. At first, I was like, holy crap, that must be a wild animal. My wife is trembling, dogs barking, and I am starting to be curious. I peel back the window cover to see her standing motionless on the path outside our trailer. I get eye contact with her, directly. I had the window cover down maybe probably 8 to 10 centimeters. What the actual heck? After gazing in my general direction for what seemed like an eternity, she calmly turns around and walks back to her tent. I go make sure our trailer is locked. After a good hour and a stiff whiskey, we manage to get back to sleep. So the next day is a Friday, setting up the tent, she mysteriously appears out of nowhere yet again. Like bam, there she is. But now this time she is actually in our sight. I hadn't had a chance to tell our friends about her before she arrived, so they were a little more friendly than I was. She asked me again if she could pet my dog, who during all of this is barking at her. I think I said something like, she isn't being very friendly towards you right now, so I'd prefer you didn't. She didn't pet my dog, but she also just stood there staring at me like she was considering how she would dismember my limbs. She notices our friend's tent, Brand, as he is still setting it up. She comments on how it's the same model as hers, although a larger sleeping capacity. My buddy picked up on the creep vibes and my general displeasure, and he said, oh yeah, cool, and then kept setting it up. Well, she starts grabbing at the tent pegs and picks up the hammer and says she will help him set it up because she's experienced with it. My buddy declines and asks for his tools back. Cue the psychopath stare down, but this time she has a hammer in hand, adding to the oh crap factor. She literally just drops everything right there and runs off. I go on to explain the last few days to our friends and they agree we need to keep an eye on her. So by this time, the two girlfriends whose site she had hijacked had packed up and gone. It's now Friday night and we've been drinking all day and we're feeling pretty good. It's maybe about 11 p.m. and when she walks over to our site again, she says, hey, you guys seem to have a lot of extra room with that tent and camper. Do you guys think I could stay with you guys tonight? We could have a lot of fun in there. My buddy is feeling pretty good from the day and all the beers, so he's pretty for it when he replies, did you just propose a gangbang to us? Now this whole time I'm just sitting in my camp chair with my whiskey taking this all in. She wasn't really taking notice to me at all so far. Then she smiles. She turns her head and looks directly down at me and says, I like your friend. She then turns around and walks away into the darkness of the night towards the forest. What the heck? We are now terrified that she is going to return. I decided right then and there if we see her again in a creepy fashion, I'm calling the park warden. This is getting ridiculous. Well, that night is winding down, so we all decide to walk together to the bathrooms to clean up for bed. My wife pulls on my hoodie and says, babe, look. I look over and see that the site she has set up on is completely destroyed. Stuff is everywhere. Just stuff, garbage, clothing, food, everywhere. I thought, okay, this is weird. Could this have been a bear? No, we would have heard it. I then noticed that the tent is gone. She is gone and left the tent site in a complete mess. As luck would have it, the park patrol was completing their fire rounds and were there. They saw the entire scene. It was just an absolute wreck. It looked like somebody just had exploded a bomb there. We told them there was a girl staying there who was acting erratic and who we suspected was squatting on the site based on our conversation with the two girls earlier that week. We didn't see her again for the rest of our trip until the last full day. There is a great little lookout point not far from our site which has amazing views of the river and valley below. It was perfect to see everything, and it was a perfect sunset that night in the mountains. It was a lovely send-off to an otherwise beautiful honeymoon. Just when we thought we were done with her, she emerged once again from behind me. We were sitting on a couple of chairs that were bolted into place on the viewpoint, taking pictures of the valley below. As my wife is looking through the camera viewfinder, she picks up on the woman in the distance. She is standing in the woods a little ways down the mountain towards the valley, watching us. As her final act, she walked up the mountainside and sat right beside us on a boulder that was beside the chairs. She says nothing, just sits there. My wife has the brilliant idea of asking me to take the last picture of the scenery, and she just gives me a little wink. I pick up on her idea right away, and I position myself so this woman is going to be in the picture. My wife wanted this lady's photo in the event something bad happens with her before we can leave the area. We took our final looks at the beautiful scenery and headed out for our camp. We didn't see her or hear from her again. Upon reflection, we agreed this woman had some serious mental health issues, obviously. She had zero social skills, and we did witness her attempt to make friends with those two girls that shafted her in a pretty terrible way. That being said, she did things way beyond the realm of acceptable social awkwardness. There were moments I thought she would pull out a knife and kill us, all there, where we stood. More than that, the stalking, the midnight strike, and running off into the woods at night was terrifying to us. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true stories from viewers just like you. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like. One of the most requested topics on the channel is camping stories. You guys have sent in tons of your allegedly true creepy encounters while out camping. These stories will truly freak you out, as they definitely had me looking over my shoulder while recording them. If you would like to share your story on a future video, be sure to submit yours at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story. Stories like yours that keep this channel going. Now, let us dive into these allegedly true, creepy experiences while camping deep in the woods. There are some weird things that went on at my campsite throughout the years. I live in Oregon and I spend as much time in the summer camping as much as I can. I have this site that I really like that's on a mountain.
Did you know you can turn any hobby into a business with 4 simple steps? And it doesn't matter if you're into yoga, beauty, video games, or...
Being lost is already bad as it is, but being lost in the woods, especially at night, sounds like an outright nightmare. These stories are surely going to freak you out, as they detail some pretty creepy events that have happened while being lost in the woods. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit that at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. Now, without further ado, let's get into these stories. I've been living in Louisiana my entire life. For the purposes of my safety, I'll only state the state I live in. I like to go camping quite a bit, and when I do, I usually bring my friends with me. I'm a 33-year-old female, but my story takes place when I was just 22. I was off for the summer from college, and I decided I wanted to go camping. As I said before, I usually take my friends with me, but this summer, they all had plans, and most of them were going out of state to see friends, family, and loved ones. I'm the type of person who really loves a good adventure, and while my friends being unable to go with me was a bit of a bummer, I wasn't about it to let me hold back from camping. So in June, I decided I'd go camping. I wanted somewhere somewhat new to me, and I wanted to wander off the beaten path. I know this can be dangerous, but at the time, my thought was, what's the sense of going on an adventure if I can't do a little exploring? It wasn't the first time I'd done something like this, but the key difference this time was, I didn't have any friends with me. This was the first and last time I'd ever make that mistake. I went to a fairly popular camping ground a few towns away from where I live. I was geared up and excited for whatever adventures may come my way. For the first while, I explored around potential camping spots, and when I got the chance, I snuck off into the woods. The thing about this campsite is, like any site, there are areas that they recommend you to camp in, or in some cases, tell you to camp. These are usually the areas a lot of tourists or first-time campers might stay. Then, there are the areas you are recommended to stay out of or told straight up not to camp in. I ignored the warning signs and went off the trail, with my gear in tow. I had food and plenty of water, and thought I'd be fine while out there. I told my family I'd be camping over the weekend, but I never actually told them where I'd be. I know, this was stupid. The thrill seeker I was, I didn't think much of it at the time. To me, it was just another way for the trip to be more exciting. I wandered for hours. Upon first leaving the beaten path, it was about 1:30 in the afternoon. When I finally decided to set up camp for the night, in a clearing I had found, it was around 7:30 in the evening. I set up camp, ate, and chilled alone. The only sounds accompanying me were the sounds of birds and other animals, and the slight breeze blowing through the trees. I felt so relaxed even though I was aware I didn't know where I was. I didn't think this as a problem at the time, as I'd been marking trees along my walk, so I knew how to get back if need be. Anyways, as night was drawing closer, I decided to set up my tent, and once dark came, I headed into my tent for the night. At least, that was the plan. I figured I'd get up early and maybe explore for another day, staying one more night before heading back. I'd mark my way as I did, and figured I'd have no problems getting home after that. Sadly, this wasn't how things would go at all. I crashed pretty quickly, and was sleeping soundly until I heard something or someone approaching. It was the sound of snapping twigs, and then the sound of talking that initially woke me up. This didn't initially bother me, as I thought maybe someone had seen my markers and wandered out there themselves to explore. I carried a big knife on me at all times as well, and was fully prepared to use it if need be. The thing that first bothered me was the fact that I heard two men. It wasn't that they were men that bothered me, it was that some of what I was hearing coming from them. There was a discussion about the pieces of rope on the trees. This led them to talking about how someone might be out there. My first thought was, I'm an idiot. This could be game and fish wardens, or some form of law.
What?
Ramen bought you, I did.
Thank you.
Are you mad at me still from earlier?
No, I'm not. I'm just
Oh,
kind of tired.
oh, that's super cool.
Alright, even though nobody's watching the stream, I am gonna leave. Goodbye. Wait, frick.